Welcome back to CHIRLA TV. I'm your host, Karen Hernandez, and I have a special guest today. We have the Executive Director of CHIRLA, Angélica Salas. Welcome to the show today. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Karen.
We're so excited to have you, and thank you. We're going to talk about the national campaign that CHIRLA is a part of. But first and foremost, what can you tell us? What is the update going on with CHIRLA and the campaign?
Well, CHIRLA, one of CHIRLA's priorities is to move forward a pathway to citizenship, to win a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented immigrants who are currently working, contributing, and raising families in this country, but who do not yet have protection. So one of CHIRLA's campaigns for really since its inception is to win legalization and that path to citizenship. It's called Yes to Immigrants.
Yes, Immigrants Forward.
Yes, Immigrants Forward. And the campaign is really an opportunity for immigrants and their allies to get involved and to pressure Congress and the administration to finally deliver on the promises that they make. And so we keep fighting because our lives are at stake. This is about our families being united. It's about our ability to live in this country with freedom. And so our Yes to Immigrants Forward campaign is about us moving forward. It's not about getting stuck in the status quo where we don't have rights and we don't have protection, but it's about moving forward in order for us to be able to continue contributing to this country, but more importantly, that our families are safe and that we have opportunities that we ourselves have invested in for so long.
That makes sense. Like you said, there's 11 million folks that are undocumented, many that are watching the show today. But this campaign was formed for folks like them, like us, right? The campaign, what is their focus? Specifically, una reforma migratoria, me imagino, right? But immigration reform, what does that look like right now, especially during this administration?
Well, first and foremost, it will always mean the ability for us to change our immigration laws so people have the opportunity to live in this country fully recognized and with full rights. That's what it's about. And so our fight for immigration reform is about making sure that any advancement in immigration law actually provides you with citizenship. And how do you get to that? First, you're able to apply for a permanent legal residency, what we all call a green card. And after 5 years for most, it means that then you can apply for citizenship. With citizenship, you have protection from deportation, you have a political voice in this country, you have access to certain jobs and opportunities. Many of us have gone through that route. I came to this country as a child. I was undocumented. I saw the separation of my family. I was able, my mother who had been deported came back. We were able to finally legalize our status in this country. My mom, who was the one who had been deported, was the first one in the mid-90s to finally become a citizen of the United States. Wow. And she votes every single election because she knows that her voice matters for all the people who don't have an opportunity. So when we talk about that campaign, it's about that recognition of individuals who've lived here for decades, and who haven't had the protection. Why do we also fight for legal status and full legal status? Right now, there are individuals who are living in this country with temporary protected status. Most of them are from Central America, but also from some African countries, and also Haitians. And many of them live permit to permit. That means that every year they have to pay a fee, and they're really at the mercy of the federal government as to whether or not that permission is going to be renewed. And then we saw during the Trump years that what they did was they took away that protection. And from one day to the next, people had legal status and then they didn't. And so people need permanent status so that they don't have to live with that uncertainty. The same can be said for those who have DACA. So the DACA program was really a result of many years of fighting for permanent legal status for immigrant youth. The result was DACA. Well, now DACA was taken to the courts, and we're now it's in this situation where we're not sure if DACA is going to survive. It certainly hasn't survived for the youngest undocumented immigrants who today do not have access to that protection.
That's a really good point. the permit, that it could be revoked at any moment. So what you're saying is this campaign, what CHIRLA's focus is to have a campaign that leads to citizenship, correct? And that includes folks that have a permit, that we want them to have a citizenship, not just a permit they're continuing to renew every 1 to few years, right? So that's a great point. We're gonna continue talking about this. We're gonna take a quick commercial break and we will continue this important conversation. Thank you, Angélica. Welcome back. Before we took a break, we were talking about the Yes Immigrants Forward campaign, but I want to just switch gears and talk about the State of the Union address that the president gave last month. I want to talk about what was said, your thoughts about the address and the speech that he gave. What are your thoughts about what President Biden spoke about last month?
Well, there's two things that I want to talk about with President Biden. The first thing is how often he doesn't talk about immigration. So the one thing that we were very satisfied when he actually addressed the nation in the middle of obviously a global crisis is that he included immigration in his speech. There was a lot of belief that maybe he was not going to include immigration, but he did. And I think that's a result of a lot of the pressure of the communities to say, you cannot leave us out of one of the most significant domestic issues that this nation is facing, and obviously that you're not going to speak of the lives of the immigrant community. But the most important thing that I got out of that speech is how many times he didn't mention immigrants. So he talked, for example, about coming out of the pandemic, and he talked about all the lives that were lost during the pandemic. Well, that was a wonderful opportunity for him to talk about the many immigrant lives that were lost during this pandemic, many times because as undocumented immigrants, there was no access to health care. There was no access to protection, especially because the majority of the undocumented community were those essential workers that he talked about. He lifted up examples of meat packing plants and factories that were making American goods. Well, guess who was working in those meat packing factories? Those were immigrants, most of them undocumented. If we had food on our table, if we have food on our table today, in the midst of a pandemic, it's because you have farm workers, most of them who are undocumented, who are working those fields. 71% of the farm workers who are working this nation's agricultural fields are undocumented. So for me, it's those moments of not taking the opportunity to recognize our community. And there are so many other moments where he could have just lifted up the contributions of immigrants. And why I think that is important, it's because he's addressing the nation. And so the nation needs to be able to see immigrant communities as part of them, as part of the American community, not separate. So then almost towards the end of his speech, after many mentions of almost every other issue, he finally came to immigration. And he started with what I believe is a failed and a continued talking point, which is to begin a speech on immigration with border security.
So he began immigration with starting first with border security.
What he said was, and on immigration, we need to secure our borders. Right there, I saw, it's like that's red meat to all of the conservative and conservative Democrats and also the Republicans, right? And then he talked about at our borders, he talked about individuals who are seeking refuge. And then he said, and yeah, we'll give those who need our protection entry, but then if they don't, we'll just send them back in a very, what I considered in a very callous way, considering that in this moment, we're dealing with mass refugees from a war, resulting from the war between Ukraine and Russia, where you see all of these people fleeing for their lives, and yet there is a compassion and a deep level of empathy for those communities. But at our southern borders, we see the Haitian community, we see Africans who are seeking asylum, we see the Central American community, and then it's like, no, but not you. And so there's this duality in which you treat different communities in a different way. Finally, he did say, and I actually noted, he did say again that he supported immigration reform and a path to citizenship for dreamers and people with TPS, farm workers, and essential workers. And then he ended his speech with, let's get it done. And to me, I was like, well, that's what, he has said. That's what President Obama said. That's what the president before him said. Mm-hmm. And I would say the only one who didn't say that was obviously Trump, because he was clearly against us. But to me, what's lacking and what was not said is, so how are we going to get it done?
Right.
When are we going to get it done? What's the timeline? This year? Next year? Our families have been waiting 35 years to finally get a new legalization. They can't wait 10 more years. They can't wait another year. They need a solution now.
I think that's, like you said, unfortunate. There was missed opportunities that the president could have moved forward and made more affirmative remarks. We're going to continue with this conversation because we want to talk about how do we move forward from that address, okay? We're going to take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back. We're back from commercial break and we are here with Angélica. We're going to discuss, based on the State of the Union address the president gave, unfortunate that it wasn't strong enough for us. We want more, right? We were talking about the campaign that CHIRLA is focusing on, Yes to Immigrants Forward. How does that connect? How can now folks that are seeing us at home, how can they get involved? What can they do to really bring this forward and really get immigration reform?
Well, you've heard the saying, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Well, we have to be the squeaky wheel. We have to continue to say, this is what you promised. This is what you have to deliver for our communities, because it means a better life in this country. It means that we are really recognized for the work that we do, recognized for the human beings that we are, recognized for the humanity that is owed to us. And so I feel like it's very important for us to continue to pressure Congress to take action, and for us to have our elected officials, each one of them represent our immigrant community. I also believe strongly that the way that you make your voice heard is if you are able to vote, to continue to vote. And to demonstrate that in this country, the Latino community, the new American voter, is an important constituency that needs to be paid attention. So let me tell you, immigrant voters, after they've gone through all their journey in this country, they become citizens, and then they register to vote. These voters are some of the most consistent voters in our country because there's a value to their participation. And so what we need to do is activate them. We need to demonstrate that the Latino community, Latinx community, is actually going to be determining who's going to get elected. I always say it's less about the candidate and it's more about us, how we're participating, how we're getting activated. Are we registering to vote? Are we making our voice heard? And so for CHIRLA, we're embarking right now in a major civic engagement campaign because we're in the middle of the 2022 midterm elections.
Very important year this year.
Yeah. And part of the reason that immigration reform hasn't moved forward is because there is such a the margins of elected officials between the two parties is so slim. And so what we need to do is we need to open up those margins so that there are more people who are elected who are courageous, who are going to stand with us, and who are going to take action on what they promised when they were seeking our vote. But I think it's just important for the Latino community to continue to vote, to participate. We will make the difference in Arizona, in Nevada, in states like Georgia, Florida, and right here in the state of California, where we're filming the show today. There are about 9 seats that are up for grabs. And so who wins is determined by the Latino community. So CHIRLA is going to be, and CHIRLA Action Fund are going to be working very closely in order to ensure that our voice is heard, but also that the issue of immigration is front and center, and that anybody who wants to be re-elected into office or elected into office understands that they have to deliver for our immigrant community. State of California, but you can talk about other states as well, but in the state of California, half the children of California are the sons or daughters of immigrants.
And we need their votes too.
And and many times they don't understand. We're a lot of, we're mixed status families. So maybe the children are the parents are undocumented, but the children are U.S. citizens. When they turn 18, they're eligible to vote. Yes. The last thing I want to say is our immigrant community contributes in so many ways. And again, we're in the middle of a war. We have young men and women who are fighting on the front lines day in and day out, giving their lives in order to defend this country and defend the ideals of democracy and liberty in the world. And yet their families are here. Many of them are undocumented. That has to change. It's not right. It's not fair. And we have to lift our voices to make ourselves heard.
And also, we mentioned about folks that can vote. What about the folks that are seeing us today that can't vote? How can they get involved? Is it still possible for them, even though they can't vote? How can they? What can they do?
Democracy is something where everybody can participate in different ways. And so, what I have to say, I am so proud of the work that CHIRLA does on civic engagement, because many of the people who are knocking doors and who are leading our campaigns are immigrants themselves. Many of them don't have the right to vote. Our political director, everybody who runs our political campaigns themselves are immigrants. They're documented. Some of them don't have a legal status in this country, but they know that they can actually motivate people who do have the power to vote and to vote on their issues and to vote in favor of our community. And that if they vote, then we all thrive.
Well, thank you, Angélica. It's really important that we get this information. We're going to be right back, and we're going to continue talking about Yes to Immigrants Forward after this commercial break. We're back here with Angélica Salas, Executive Director of CHIRLA. Right before the break, we were talking about how folks can get involved, either through voting. If you are a citizen or if you're a non-citizen, you can still get involved. But actually, right now, CHIRLA is having a membership drive. Tell us more about this membership drive and how can folks that are watching us get involved right now? Well,
first of all, CHIRLA's strength comes from its membership. I am so proud to say we are a mass membership organization made up of immigrants and their families, their allies who support our mission to create a just society fully inclusive of immigrants.
And that's what CHIRLA is, for everybody.
And it's really about supporting that mission. But if you want to even be more involved, you can actually become a dues-paying member of CHIRLA and join over 47,000 individuals who have said, yes, I want to support CHIRLA's mission. And what happens with your membership is that it becomes part of our resources for us to advance policy and advocacy campaigns in an unlimited basis. And also it is contributed to our CHIRLA Action Fund, our sister organization, to also advance our political campaigns, our civic engagement, get out the vote campaigns. So it's a very small amount of money, $25. You can't even go to Starbucks and come out with a couple of coffees for less than $25.
Yes, of course.
So $25 a year. There are other categories, but what that does is it means that this is an organization funded by the very immigrants who are actually moving forward their agenda. And so this is important for us. Be a proud CHIRLA member. I'm a CHIRLA member. I've been a CHIRLA member for many, many years because I feel very strongly that I too have to contribute beyond my work. I also contribute by being a member of the organization. And the last thing I want to say, most organizations like the NAACP, organizations that like the ACLU, they all have membership components because everybody knows that in order to advance our political agenda, our policy agenda that is going to support human rights, it needs the investment of of the people who are impacted, in our case, the immigrants who are the individuals who are whose rights were advanced.
I love that. And folks, you heard this, you can have your coffee and you can support a wonderful organization. You can have both. And it's only once a year, is that correct?
Yeah, so it's an annual dues. And so we are very excited to invite you to become a member. It's so important. Support our community, be part of change. And you know, power is the power of people, but it's also the power of our organized dollars. And so when our organized people contribute their resources, then we can organize those funds in order to move things towards good and away from the things that harm us and towards the things that actually uplift us.
Wonderful. So for folks that are watching us at home and you love what you heard today in this episode about pushing this campaign forward and really supporting the folks that are doing the work on the ground, please feel free to reach out to CHIRLA and go on their website to support and get a membership. It's a yearly membership, like Angélica shared with us today. Do your part, right? Because it needs many folks to be a part of this.
That's right. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you, folks, and we will see you next time with CHIRLA TV.
¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos?